The annual Helen Keller Lecture at Troy University, designed to promote people who excel in their chosen fields despite physical and/or mental limitations, was held Tuesday, March 3rd in the Claudia Crosby Theater on the Troy campus. The lecture is sponsored by Troy University, the Helen Keller Foundation for Research and Education, the Alabama State Department of Education, the Alabama State Department of Rehabilitation Services, the Alabama Department of Mental Health, and the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. The guest speaker at the 20th annual lecture is Troy graduate Mackenzie Westmoreland, producer and director of the award-winning film The Historian. The lecture is introduced by Troy's Dean of Education, Dr. Catherine Hildebrand.
Troy University is fortunate to have the support of several important agencies and organizations that make this lecture and other events possible. Our partners are the Helen Keller Foundation for Research and Education, the Alabama Department of Education, the Alabama Department of Mental Health, the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services, and the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. In 2008, Troy initiated the first Bachelor of Science degree in interpreter training to help fill a need created by a lack of qualified interpreters in Alabama. This fall, we had approximately 300 students currently enrolled in the program. ITP is well represented today as our program director, Judy Robertson, and 2014 ITP graduate, Erin Ennis, will be assisting as interpreters during our lecture. Please join me in thanking them for their participation in today's event. Every campus needs a champion. Mrs. Janice Hawkins, First Lady of Troy University and an expert in the field of special education, has been a driving force behind this lecture series. At this time, I ask Mrs. Hawkins to stand and be recognized. I also want to thank my colleague, Ms. Judy Robertson, and members of the steering committee for their work in planning this year's event. As you entered the theater today, you will certainly notice the artwork on display. These pieces were the work of students at the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. We are grateful to our partners for sharing this wonderful work with us today. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our entertainment for today's program. This spring, the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind will celebrate the completion of their new music center, the school's first building that was constructed to be dedicated to music education. The new center will bring all band, piano, and choral activities together in a design that will maximize talents, education, and performance techniques of students and staff. We are fortunate this morning to experience their talents firsthand. Please join me in welcoming the Alabama School for the Blind Ensemble as they perform Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney top. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, where there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby.
Thank you for that outstanding performance. Your singing is a wonderful gift to us. Now it is my honor to introduce a gentleman who has led Troy University throughout an era of unprecedented growth. This lecture series is just one example of the many initiatives Dr. Jack Hawkins Jr. has introduced since becoming Chancellor at Troy University in 1989. Dr. Hawkins has been instrumental in the effort to internationalize Troy University in order to prepare our students to compete on a global stage. His student-first philosophy and commitment to maintaining high academic standards for the benefit of our students has left a permanent imprint on our institution. It is my honor to present to you the Chancellor of Troy University, Dr. Jack Hawkins, Jr.
Thank you, Dr. Hildebrand, and thanks to each of you for joining us for the 20th Annual Helen Keller Lecture. One ingredient in my past, and that actually was influenced by my wife in no small way, we had the good fortune and the blessing to serve the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind for 10 years prior to coming to Troy. And so it has been a special place for us for many years, and so we're delighted to be able to share this occasion with you, an occasion that we look forward to each year. And I would be remiss if I didn't say to the School for the Blind Ensemble, just outstanding. We're so proud of you students and proud of the addition that you've offered this morning to all of us. It's also with great pride that I introduce to you a few special guests from the agencies that we consider our strongest partners. I would ask that they stand and be recognized, and then we can all applaud them at one time at the very end. Students, many of you major in areas that are of interest to our colleagues. So when I mention their name, you take note, because it may lead to an employment contact. Because all of these folks are in important roles and roles that may be of some interest to you. The Helen Keller Eye Research Foundation, Dr. Bob Morris. And Bob, if you and all of our colleagues will just stand and remain standing. Miss Keller Johnson Thompson, great niece of Helen Keller, after whom this lecture series is named. Ms. Laura Beckwith. Our colleagues from the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind, President John Mashia and First Lady Ms. Dr. Nancy Mashia. Ms. Shirley Hamer, Ms. Lynn Hanner, Ms. Vera Hendricks, Mr. Patrick Robinson, whose daughter Amber is one of our students, Ms. Carla Smith, the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services, Mr. Curtis Gleason, Mr. Ashley Townsend, the Alabama Department of Mental Health, Ms. Charlene Crump, and Mr. Steve Hammerdinger. Please join me in welcoming our partners this morning. This lecture series celebrates the spirit of a lady who I think may have been Alabama's greatest citizen, Miss Helen Keller. Miss Keller inspired the world by overcoming great odds, and in the process she became the world's foremost champion of those with special needs. Past lecturers over this two-decade period have included Eric Weinmeyer, the first blind man to reach the summit of Mount Everest, and since he has climbed every major mountain in the world. Ms. Heather Whitestone, our first deaf Miss America. The former U.S. Senator and late friend Howell Heflin, who was a close friend of the Keller family. Actress Patty Duke, who portrayed Miss Helen Keller on stage and screen. The best retina specialist and one of the world's great eye surgeons, Dr. Bob Morris, here this morning. And Dr. John Mascia, the president of the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind, who delivered a great program. And I might add to Bob and to John, thank you. You honor us by your presence. Our special guest this morning, our speaker, continues the tradition of inspirational speakers in this lecture series. We welcome home a gentleman and an artist who has the honor of being the first Troy alumnus to deliver this lecture. And as I look out, I see Dr. and Mrs. David Dye here, and certainly they had great influence on our speaker while he was a student. It was Alexander Graham Bell, and indeed we celebrate his birthday today, his 168th birthday. Of course, Alexander Graham Bell is known for the invention of the telephone, and many of you may know that the telephone was originally invented not for the hearing world, but to benefit the deaf. Now, serendipitously, the largest number of beneficiaries have been those of us who have the benefit of hearing. And while the hearing are the greatest beneficiaries, they were not the intended audience. Mr. Bell is also the author of a famous statement about persistence. He said, "When one door closes, another door opens." Indeed, that's the ability to turn lemons into lemonade, challenges into opportunities. Our speaker today is the essence of persistence. Mackenzie Westmoreland left Troy with a dream of directing and producing movies. He became visually impaired about 6 years ago in the year 2009. He woke up blind due to retinopathy. He decided that even though he no longer had sight, he still had the vision to create films. As Thoreau said, it's really not what you're looking at, it's what you see that counts. Mac's first feature film, The Historian, was released in 2014 and won the award for the best first feature film in competition at the Long Island International Film Expo. Mr. Westmoreland has co-written actually two plays, Sarah Return and The Katrina Project, Hell and High Water, which has been produced in 4 countries and throughout the United States. Indeed, in 2007, the U.S. Senate sponsored a one-night-only performance of The Katrina Project at the historic Lincoln Theater in Washington, D.C. Mr. Westmoreland is preparing to shoot his second film, The Hollow, set in his home state of Mississippi. He makes his home in Manhattan, where he also serves, and we're proud of this, as president of Troy University's New York Alumni Chapter. Please join me in welcoming a gifted artist and a Trojan, Mr. Mac Westmoreland.
Thank you. Good morning. It is so nice to be back home in Troy. It's been quite a while since I visited the campus. In fact, it's been almost 25 years. It is wonderful to be here. I want to take just a second before I start to give some special thank yous to Chancellor Jack Hawkins and his lovely wife, Mrs. Janet Hawkins. I want to thank them for the invitation to be part of this event. To Judy Robertson, Judy Brighton-Fulmer, Andy Ellis, Tori Lee Averett, Caroline Hutchinson, my friend Joel, who's been chaperoning me this morning. There's so much work that goes into organizing an event like this, and you guys have been wonderful and diligent in the details of accommodating all of my needs. You're truly the unsung heroes of today. And I need to give a very special thanks to the doctors David and Judy Dye, Ed and Deborah Hicks, not only for your hospitality this week while I'm in town, but for decades of being both my mentor, my teachers, my friends, my support, and what I like to refer to as my extended family. The influence you guys have had on both my life and my work is greater than you know. And I really want to tell you how much I appreciate that. We're here today in honor of Helen Keller. She is an inspiration to us all. She is a woman and a soul that refused to live alone in a world of darkness and silence. And despite her physical challenges, she found a way to connect to the people and the world around her and to give back more than she received. That need for connection, in my mind, is more than what makes us human. It's what makes us divine. I am keenly aware that by being your speaker today, I am in the company of some amazing people. Former speakers have been talented and accomplished individuals that have broken barriers in their respective fields. And I just want all of you to understand, I am not one of those people. I cannot guarantee that any of us will leave here any more inspired or any wiser than when we arrived. But the one thing that I do hope for is that we all leave a little more connected to each other with a greater and deeper understanding of who we are and what we are capable of. As I said, it's been almost 25 years since I was a student on this campus, and I understand there have been many changes over that time. Changes to its physical aesthetic, changes to its curriculum, to the faculty, to the look and feel of the student body. Even the name has changed since I was a student here. And being a Southerner, I realize that change is difficult. We like our traditions. We like our sense of nostalgia. But the fact is, change is growth. Without growth, we stop living. We're just existing. Change is sort of the key word for me today. It is a word that over the past 5.5 years I have had to come to accept, to embrace, and even learn to look forward to on a daily basis. I need to tell you a few things before we get started. I need to confess a few things so that you'll understand my point of view. I am a diabetic. I am totally blind. I have an amputated leg. I have complete kidney failure, and I'm only alive at this moment due to dialysis 3 times a week. I am also completely grateful for every one of those conditions. I do not define myself by these disabilities. They are a constant reminder to me of how much joy can be found in the struggle of living. I don't like to say that I am defined by these challenges, but rather refined by them. You see, they teach me to set my priorities in the proper order. They teach me not to take the small things for granted, whether it's the feel of the sun on my skin or a hand on my shoulder, the sound of a stranger singing in the subway, or my nephew playing in the yard, the smell of the earth as you walk through a freshly plowed garden. These are the things that make life worth living. My disabilities do not keep me from living. They force me to do it. As I heard the choir sing today, I'm reminded of the last time that I performed on this stage. It was in Dr. Philip Kelly's opera workshop production of The Wizard of Oz. I played the Cowardly Lion. Some of you may actually remember that performance. I know it was one of my favorite moments here at Troy. But what I was too young and too arrogant at that time to know was just how poignant the lessons of that Frank L. Baum classic would be in the way I approach life today. You see, like Dorothy, I had an unforeseen event that set me on a path of self-discovery that required a change of mind, a change of heart, and the courage to face my fears. My story really does begin on the morning of August 12th, 2009. It was just a few days before my 40th birthday, and I woke up expecting it to be like any other day. Instead, I woke up in a world of darkness. In the few short hours while I slept, diabetic retinopathy had changed me from being a sighted individual to a non-sighted one. I can't begin to tell you how terrifying that was, to literally wake up blind. I sat on the edge of my bed, petrified to even move. And every what if you can think of ran through my head. What if this isn't just some weird fluke? What if this is a permanent condition? What if I am actually blind? What if I can't take care of myself? What if I can't work? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I'm homeless? What if I'm on the street and vulnerable to being attacked or mugged? What if I become a burden to the people I care about the most? And then fear saved the best for last. The one fear that gripped me like nothing else did. What if I become one of those people where it's easier for the sighted world to leave them out rather than include them in? What if I become one of those people that's only invited to 1 or 2 events a year, and after the initial hellos, I'm placed in a corner like a decorative plant, sitting there, listening to people have life, but not participating in it? That frightened me. And then somewhere in the back of my head, I heard a whisper. God doesn't give us what we can't handle. It was the sound of my mother's voice. I knew it was her because I had heard her say that 1,000 times when I was a child. It was probably her favorite saying, God doesn't give you what you can't handle. After 40 years of hearing that, and even saying it myself a few times, it was the first time I was absolutely certain of it. God doesn't give us what we can't handle. I stood up, and in that act of physically standing, I was saying to the universe, I will not be someone stuck in a corner, not participating in life. I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had no idea how I was going to get out of my own room at that time. But I knew that there had to be a way. I'd seen blind people move through the streets before, never really paid attention to them. But I knew that if it could be done, I would find a way. One of the first things that I had to do was discover that I could not do it by myself. I knew I would need help, and I assumed that New York City was going to be way too overwhelming to learn how to be a blind individual. I gave up my job, gave up my apartment, moved back to Mississippi, and tried to find a medical reason that this had happened, and to also see if there was anything that could be done to restore my sight. Short answer is there was not. Surgery did not work, and I was told that at that time there was nothing left medically to be done. I had to make a decision. Would I live my life in the comfort of my parents' home, but not doing the things I wanted to do, or would I go out and be an independent blind person? Well, that answer was pretty easy for me. I knew that that was not a life I wanted to live. I spent 7 months at the Reach Center for the Blind in Tupelo, Mississippi. It was absolutely the right place for me at that time, and to this day I am completely grateful to the faculty and the staff and even the students for helping me regain my independence and be the person that I am today. Now, Tupelo is certainly a lot different than New York City, but it's where I needed to be. It was the place that nurtured me and allowed me to fail, if you will. It was not easy. Learning to be an independent blind person was scary. Trust me, mobility is hard. Walking with a guide cane did not come naturally for me. It still doesn't. But with time, with patience, it happened. If you want to talk about building a level of confidence, try industrial arts. I was never handy with power tools before I went blind. Suddenly I'm now using nail guns and drill presses and the dreaded table saw. I remember every time I flipped the switch and I would hear the whirl of the table saw blade, I would count my fingers and pray to God I would still have the same number when I finished passing the wood through. But you just kept remembering, God doesn't give us what we can't handle. I came out of the center ready to return to New York. And in the spring of 2011, that's just what I did. I was ready to take the world by storm with a guide cane in hand. I was going to make my mark. Now, of course, there are certain things that have to happen. You have to find a job. You have to be able to pay your bills. I had been lucky enough to attend an exhibit called Dialogue in the Dark. It is a traveling exhibit, and if you ever have the opportunity to see it, I truly recommend it. The exhibit allows its patrons to see the world the way the blind do. You are in the dark. You travel through the rooms, and they're set up to be different environments. They're totally tactile, and you use a guide cane. The tour guides are all visually impaired, and I thought this is the perfect job for me. I applied, and I was the first hire once they came to New York City. First day of training went perfectly. Second day of training, I woke up and knew something was wrong. I called my boss, told them that I didn't feel well, that I was going to the doctor. I would let them know. I hailed a cab and actually took myself to the hospital. After a lot of tests, they came back and told me that I had an infection in the bones of my foot. The recommendation was amputation. That stunned me. I had lost my sight but I still have my eyes. Now you're talking about literally cutting off a part of my body. But they weren't through. Before they could do the amputation, they would need to run a test to make sure that my heart could withstand the trauma of the surgery. That test would mean injecting a dye into my veins, and that dye would kick out the rest of my kidney function. I would have complete renal failure, and I would need to begin dialysis that week. In the course of 3 days, I was going to lose my leg and my kidneys. Seemed like a bit much. Certainly there has to be another way. I asked the surgeon, this can't be the only course of treatment. They told me that I could try a treatment of 6 months of a strong antibiotic drip. They would have to remove all of the infected bones in my foot. I would never walk correctly again, and chances are I would still ultimately have to have the amputation. But it was my choice. I laid in my hospital bed that night, and I'm not ashamed to tell you, a few tears flowed out of my eyes. I just felt like this was too much. I had handled going blind. I had found a way to come back, but I wasn't sure I could do it this time. As I lay there feeling sorry for myself, I heard an echo from my past. God doesn't give us what we can't handle. Wasn't quite as certain about it this time. Like I said, this time it felt a little overwhelming. But then I realized faith means nothing if it's never tested. I thought about it and thought, if you can come back from being blind, you can come back from this. And when I let go of my fears, when I let go of trying to hang on to something that wasn't working anymore, it was so freeing. There was almost comedy in it. I found myself laying in that hospital bed laughing at the absurdity of my situation and actually feeling good about it. I know that sounds weird, but let me tell you something. Of all the 5 senses that we have, our most important one is our sense of humor. When the surgeon woke me up on the operating table to tell me that it was over and asked me how I felt, I looked up and told him, foot loose and fancy free. I spent 2 months in the hospital after the surgery, doing rehabilitation, first learning how to hobble on one leg with a walker, then learning slowly how to move about on a prosthetic leg. It was a challenge. It was hard. It often scared me, but I felt the reward of it every day. What also happened as I was going through the process was my heart was changing. Before losing the leg, before all of this had happened, I never considered myself a materialistic person, but I'll admit I liked nice things. When you're blind and you can't see those things, they just don't mean as much anymore. And when you're put in a situation where you are truly dependent upon someone just to get food or to go to the bathroom, you learn that it's not the things in life that are important, it's the people around you that are important. Every night during those 2 months that I was in the hospital, I had at least one visitor, often 2 or 3, sometimes 7 or 8. In fact, there were a few times that the nurses had to come down and remind us this was not a nightclub. But I remember one day the nurse came in and told me in all of her years working in the hospital, she had never seen a patient who had so many dedicated people come and visit them. I must be one special person. I thought about that for a little while, and I told her, no, I'm not. I'm actually a very ordinary person. What I have is very special friends. And what I also have is a very keen awareness of just how important these people are to me. So I dedicate a lot of time to making sure those relationships, those connections are nourished. And because of that, I have been greatly, greatly rewarded. As I came out of the hospital, I was ready once again to take the world by storm. I wasn't really sure how I was going to do it. You know, visually impaired, an amputee, dialysis takes up a lot of my time. It limits how I travel. It limits what I can do in a single day. But somewhere in there, I knew that an opportunity would present itself to go back to work and do the things that I love to do. That opportunity came with a phone call from a dear friend of mine. It was 2012, and my good friend, Miles Doliak, had written a screenplay and called me and said, I want you to read this. Now, I won't talk a lot about assistive technology, but all I can say is thank God for it. Without it, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I want to do. But he sent me the screenplay, and I read it, and I called him back and said, I think this is really good. I think that you need to produce this. And he said, well, you know me. I don't think I could do this by myself. Would you be interested in producing this with me? Now, I had to take a moment. I've never made a film before in my life. If you were talking about a stage play, I would have been in without hesitation. But I don't know anything about making a film. I told Miles, you're picking the wrong guy here. I appreciate the offer, but please, I couldn't tell you a lens from a camera. You know, I have no idea what I'm doing. He reminded me he had no idea what he was doing. But, you know, if we're going to do it, we'll either fail together or succeed together. I still had my doubts. I guess I just never listened. God does not give us what we can't handle. Here was the opportunity I was waiting for, and I was allowing fear to keep me from taking it. How silly is that? I had had a change of mind when I went blind about the capabilities of the physically challenged. Not only did I have a change of mind, I had to change the mind of the people around me about the capabilities of the physically challenged. When I lost my leg, I had a change of heart about what I valued most in the world and what was truly important to me. And now here was an opportunity to do the work that I wanted to do, and yet I was going to allow fear to keep me from doing it? No. I had to think of my cowardly lion days and work up my inner courage and agree to do it. Once again, wasn't sure what I was doing, but I knew I had to give it a try. And after hearing so many no's, so many you'll never get this made, we finally went into production in the summer of 2013, and in the summer of 2014, we premiered at Dances with Films in Los Angeles, California, And later that summer, we won Best First Feature Film, Best Actor, and Best Supporting Actor at the Long Island International Film Expo. In January of this year, our film was released on demand on all of the major cable platforms. And on the 24th of this month, we will be released on iTunes and Amazon and Hulu and Vudu and whatever other platforms are out there. I know I'm giving myself a bit of a sales plug here, but for someone who's never made a film to actually be recognized in that way, it's pretty impressive. At least it is in my mind. It makes me feel good. My point of all of this is that we have to accept and be willing to change no matter what struggles we are given. We all have struggles. You know, some of us have visual impairments, some of us have hearing impairments, some of us have physical and mobility challenges. Some of us just have troubles in life. I mean, that's part of it. But if we're not willing to make the changes necessary, if we allow fear to keep us from being what we can be, we stop living. We're just existing. We're scared of fear because it lives in the unknown. And we are naturally afraid of that we have not experienced before. But fear is not the only thing that lives in the unknown. The unknown is also the address of potential and possibility. It's all about changing our perception. You know, just because something is dangerous doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't do it. Sometimes we find great things in that. Good things can be found in bad struggles. Success can be found in failure. I remember shortly after coming out of blind school, trying to be an independent blind person. My parents weren't so sure about that. I remember having lunch with my dad one day, and we had finished, and he said, "Sit here. I'm going to throw this stuff away and go to the bathroom, and I will come back and get you." I didn't want to have to be that person who has to sit and wait on someone else to come back and get me. So I got up, left the restaurant, walked across the parking lot, found the truck, and was waiting there. He came out of the restaurant just in a huff and saying, "Why didn't you wait?" I didn't want to. "Why do you have to be so damn independent?" "Because I'm your son." He didn't really know how to respond to that, so he let it go. Over the years, he's finally learned that he has to change just like me. He still has his fears, but he doesn't voice them anymore, and that's good enough for me. One of the things that as friends of people with challenges have to understand is that you have to be able to let us take our falls. When my friends walk with me, they're always so careful to point everything out that it drives me crazy. If I trip, I trip. If I fall down, I fall down. I learn not to trip over the same thing twice. If I walk into a wall, I will always remember that wall is there. The point is, if you're around someone who has these challenges, you can't love them so much that you won't let them fall down. You have to love them enough to let them fall down, because only then can we learn how to get back up on our own. In doing that, you give us our dignity and our pride, and we feel better in ourselves. That takes a change of mind, that takes a change of heart, and it takes courage. In closing today, there are only a couple of things that I want you to walk out of here remembering. One is, as you move down your path in life, be well aware that there are going to be obstacles and struggles. But that's okay. They are meant to be there, and they are meant to be there for a reason. If we can change our mindset and change our perception on how we look at these things, we can turn them into good things. We can learn from them. We can grow from them. We can change because of them. Walk out today with the words of a one-legged blind man ringing through your ears. God does not put a mountain in our path in order to block our way. God puts a mountain in our path so that we all have an opportunity to stand on top of the world. And that is exactly how you have made me feel today, on top of the world. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here with you. Thank you to Dr. Hawkins, and thank you to this university for having the commitment to understand and work with people who have disabilities and include them in everyday life. We are here, my friends. We are part of this fabric. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for inspiring us this morning with your presentation. I think we have learned a few words of wisdom. As we encounter fear, we become more connected to who we are and how we relate to ourselves, how we define ourselves, and how we are refined by the struggle of living. And through that, we can find joy. You've showed us how we can see potential and possibility in our circumstances, and you leave us with thoughts we will ponder a long time. Thank you. This concludes our event. Thank you for your attendance.